The debt limit showdown, it marches on to the steady drumbeat of disagreement. Today, House Speaker John Boehner coming out with his own plan. But the question is, will it actually break the impasse? We now go to the broadcast center. Our own Andrew Whitman, he's in first position with the very latest. Good evening, Andrew.
Well, good evening, Rich. Right now, the best hope for any sort of deal that would avert a U.S. government default come August 2nd are a pair of plans designed to leave both sides unhappy, but that would still raise the nation's debt limit before the deadline. And the biggest difference between those plans? Well, it seems to be timing. First is the plan from House Speaker John Boehner. His plan would increase the debt limit by $1 trillion and it would actually increase the debt limit by $2.7 trillion, enough so it would not need to be raised before Election Day next year. So the Boehner plan would allow for that if the two sides agree on nearly $2 trillion in cuts to entitlement programs. Boehner would also cap spending and force a vote on a balanced budget amendment and would not raise any new revenue or any taxes. Contrast that plan to one from Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid. It would boost the debt limit $2.7 trillion, enough so it would not need to be raised again before Election Day 2012. Now, the Reid's plan's $2.7 trillion in cuts comes from a combination of spending cuts and by factoring in the savings from the end of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Additional cuts would be possible based on the recommendations of a congressional committee. His plan does not raise taxes or revenue either. So the two plans are actually pretty close to one another, just differing on dollar amounts. They're about $300 billion apart, and on timing, whether the debt limit pops up again as an issue before the elections. So with both sides so close to a deal, there's reason to be optimistic, right? Not exactly. President Obama's thoughts on a short-term deal?
And then have to go through this whole exercise all over again. That we're not going to do.
It is Washington gridlock on display for the entire world to see, a deadline no one wants to reach.
The potential is there for massive global and national effects. The most obvious things would be an increase in interest rates for consumers and businesses. That would tend to slow economic activity pretty substantially.
There's no choice. There's no alternative. Failure is not an option.
But instead of reaching a deal, both sides seem to be talking past each other instead of to each other. From the Democrats,
we have moved in their direction so many different times, and they don't budge.
All the Republicans have to do is say yes.
The president.
This is a city where compromise is becoming a dirty word, where there's more political upside in doing what's easier for re-election, what's easier for an attack ad, than what's best for the country.
And from the GOP.
I would suggest that the president reconsider their offer rather than veto the country into default.
I know the president's worried about his next election, but my God, shouldn't we be worried about the country?
So what, if anything, can break the stalemate? Pressure, not from Washington, but instead from Wall Street. Stocks losing 84 points today after falling more than 140 earlier, as markets and traders become increasingly worried there won't be a debt deal, at least not one in time to stop a default. And that, most agree, would look a lot like the market crashes of 2008 on steroids, as a default would raise the price of everything from home and car loans to credit cards, even the Fed's interest rates and more. And voters do not apparently want that to happen. In poll after poll, anger over debt has given way to fears of a debt default, with more and more people saying they want the debt limit increased. And if it's not, there is plenty of blame to go around. Voters telling NBC News and Wall Street Journal in a poll they'll blame everyone if the nation goes into default. So far saying they'll blame Republicans more than Democrats, numbers that could easily change. Especially because no one's listening to what voters want. 6 in 10 saying they see protecting Social Security and Medicare as more important than reducing the deficit, even though both plans on the table right now focus on the deficit and would likely cut those programs to do it. And also because neither of today's emergency plans comes close to what voters would consider shared sacrifice. Neither plan raises revenues or taxes, even on the wealthy, which is the public's preferred method for reducing the debt, despite all the anti-tax rhetoric we're hearing coming out of Capitol Hill. Rich?
It's amazing, Andrew. Wouldn't you say that if I told you a month ago, 2 months ago, we'd be a week from default, but yet we'd be having a conversation that largely hasn't moved here, at least concretely, in a month, in 2 months. It's still the same old rhetoric out of D.C. Concessions from the Democrats and Republicans saying not enough.
You know, Washington has always operated something like a college student the night before a midterm or a final. You generally go to the wire to get stuff done. You just didn't expect that it would happen on something this serious, with the impact being as precarious as it could possibly be, Rich.
And we have consensus, at least, which we didn't have a couple months ago, that things wouldn't just be bad, they'd be really, really bad if they don't get a deal. And it's not just Monday night, magically they do it. The markets are starting to get skittish here and internationally as well. Everybody agrees this thing will be calamitous if they don't get a deal done, right?
What starts as a dip in the market, Rich, could easily impact every aspect of American business life and, in fact, every aspect of American life, even to the point where, you know, you could see instability across the financial sector, banks, lots of problems.
All right, Andrew, thank you.